the people see little need to accumulate wealth. As a result, about 10% of the people hold more than 65% of each nation's wealth. And it sounds a lot like capitalism, like here, not socialism. There is one more way in which to describe the difference between communism and socialism. In communism, the power to the people is and was gotten by open revolt, while in socialism, according to their own writings, the hold of the government is to be taken gradually, a bit at a time. That really sounds interesting, because it sounds to me that's what the Democrats have been trying to do here. Now, let's do something here. Let's kind of switch gears. How did it fail in countries like Russia and other communist countries? And why it is currently failing in China? Simple. The principles of socialism or communism have the government owning basically everything with no class distinction whatsoever. But that's the problem with every single government. Whether it's communist, socialist, capitalist, or fascist, there actually is no such thing as the same classes. Nobody is equal. You are either rich, you are middle class, or you are poor. In Russia, it started out where everyone was on the same playing level. That's no doubt. Then certain people started making wealth, and they gained power by this wealth. It got worse and worse and worse. The rich were eating caviar and drinking champagne, while the poor were standing in bread lines for hours on end to get crusty, moldy pieces of bread, if they were lucky. And God forbid if you had had enough and you spoke out. Usually it just disappeared and were never heard from again. And guess what? The same thing is happening in China right now as I am speaking to you. And the same thing in North Korea as well. Here's some interesting facts I will bet none of you little socialists have any idea about. In 1933, Adolf Hitler came into power through the popular vote because he told the people exactly what they wanted to hear. Does that sound familiar, my good little Democrats? The first method to gain control over free people is to tell them what they want to hear. The Germans, who were still very angry over the Treaty of Versailles after World War I and how badly the rest of the world was literally screwing them, Hitler took full advantage of that anger. Sounds like Joe Biden and the rest of the Democrats, blaming Trump for everything. Interesting. He blamed the Jews for all the monetary problems. The country at the time was not in very good shape because they were the ones that still had any kind of wealth after the German stock market crash in 1928. Why did they still have wealth? They saw how the government was spending money just willy-nilly. It did not have. And Jews owned the major banks and refused to give the government loans to cover all these very bad investments they've been making. So the Jews became the bad guys, according to Adolf Hitler. How's that? No, is this starting to sound a little familiar, campers? Is it? The second way to gain full control is to remove all the weapons from the hands of your general public. In Germany, if you were in the military or lived in the countryside and were hunting to eat, then you had every right to own a gun. But if you lived in the city, well, then the police were your friend, and you didn't need a gun, for hunting or protection. So, firearms are first thing removed from the cities and inner cities. Then rifles and shotguns out in the country were then registered so that they could be tracked to their owners. If you lived out in the country and you had a pistol, it had been ridiculous for to have one for hunting, so you had to have turned it in. If you take all the guns away from your general public, your law-abiding citizens, by doing this, and only the army, the police, the SS, and the Gestapo, they had the majority of all the weapons, so there never could be any open revolts. If there were any kind of whisperings of an open revolt, They were quelled before they even had a chance to start because a good Nazi would tell the authorities when they overheard a dissenting remark that a neighbor made, even if it was true or not. Is this starting to sound a little familiar, my friends? I mean, come on. See something, say something, which is one of what our modern Democrats are saying now. The third method of keeping people under control was through the use of terror. He gave the Gestapo, the German police, also referred to as the ATF, complete control so they could just arrest someone and throw them in jail for no reason at all. He also used the SS, which stands for shooting squad. They were Hitler's personal army, and they all started out just as his bodyguards. But as he expanded them, he used them so they could wipe out the brown shirts. Those people that helped bring Hitler into power through use of terror. Sounds a bit like Antifa to me. The SS wiped out all of the brown shirts in just one night. This night was called Night of the Long Knives. People knew if they ever foul-mouthed Hitler, they would either end up dead or in a concentration camp, which meant that you were as good as dead to begin with. Your first concentration camp was first set up and was called Dachau. It was set up in 1934. 2 years. 2 years, mind you, after he came into power. How about that one? And Hitler sent all trained unionists, party leaders, and anyone who he did not like there. All court judges were Nazis, so they voted in favor of Hitler. Oh, wow. That really starting to sound familiar again. That means that if you were a Jew in court, you had no chance of getting a fair trial because the Nazis all hated the Jews. The Nazis also created the extermination camps. These camps were designed to exterminate large groups of people on an extremely large scale. Auschwitz was the largest extermination camp to ever be made. It was referred to as the final solution. This is because the camp was the one that would totally end the Jewish race. Auschwitz, in this one camp alone, killed over 2 million Jews. Now, granted, 6 million were killed altogether in World War II. But there were other camps other than Auschwitz. Got to remember that, too. And terror took a big part in Hitler keeping complete control over Nazi Germany. But the propaganda was also the biggest part. If you didn't use propaganda, the German people wouldn't have voted for him to become chancellor in the very first place. Let's see, propaganda. Let's see, Trump is a communist sympathizer. He's in league with Russia. Trump is a racist. Can you all finally see where I'm going with this? You Antifa fools out there, you're not fighting for socialism. No. You're not fighting for communism. No. You're fighting for a form of fascism and capitalism. Yeah. How about that? You enjoy being used? Well, I guarantee you, I wouldn't. I'd be upset as hell. So, I'm going to leave these words with you right now, my friends. Remember, I love you all, each and every single one of my infidels. Remember, it's my opinion, and I'm welcome to it.